Hey guys, it's Scott with Scotty B Cards, and in this video I want to talk about 3 players that I am targeting this offseason. Every single year, it feels like a certain player, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many, are forgotten about heading into the offseason, and because of that, it presents a really good buying opportunity when it comes to sports cards. The sports card landscape and market is different than ever with the basically recession, maybe we can call it that at this point, and on top of that, just overall economic situation going on makes it tougher to really predict if it's a good deal or if everything's just down. But in this video, I have 3 players that I think are a decent buy who I am targeting. Make sure always just to do your own research. Don't ever buy something because someone tells you to. Always make sure it makes sense from your perspective. All right, let's dive into this. First player I've been looking at is Clayton Kershaw. And you might wonder why Clayton Kershaw? He's 34 years old. He already has a lot of value baked into his cards. Is there really an upside? And I think so. I think there is upside. And the reason I say that is because Clayton Kershaw is one of the most undervalued, underrated players in Major League Baseball right now, which might sound crazy. And I'm talking about baseball cards, Major League Baseball cards right now. The reason I say that, he has 3 Cy Youngs, he has an MVP. His career ERA is under 2.5, a 2.48 career ERA. This year alone is a 2.28 with 12 wins, 3 losses. Only 126 innings, still had 137 strikeouts, which is on pace with his 9.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. His strikeout to walk is actually better than his career average. He's been so good for so long we forget about him. Plus, he's a pitcher. Pitching value does not have a ton of value, but I think he's one of the best pitchers of all time. 5 ERA titles as well, as to throw that in there. This is a side note. And I want to explain why in a historical perspective. I want to show all-time ERA leaders. Kershaw isn't even in the top 20, not even in the top 40. He's number 41. So is he really that good, or am I just being dumb? I wish there was just a stat out there that would allow me to compare to all of these players, because you have like Orville Overall. Pretty funny name. Christy Mathewson's not funny, but Smokey Joe Wood. There's some other really funny ones on here like Candy Cummings and so forth. But Clayton Kershaw's behind all of those players. Was Candy Cummings really a better pitcher than Clayton Kershaw? If there's a stat that could really measure him against his peers, I would love that. And there is. It's ERA plus. ERA plus takes into consideration the era they played in. It takes the average ERA from that year and says how much better you were than that ERA. And on top of that has ballpark factors baked in because he pitches in Dodger Stadium, which is a pitching friendly park. And it takes all that into consideration and gives you a number. And that ERA plus says how much better you are than league average. So if you had a 200 ERA plus, that means you're 100% better than league average. A 150 is 50% better, and so forth. So you can see right here, Clayton Kershaw's 4th all time with ERA plus. And not just that, but he's actually number 1 all time for pitchers with more than 1,500 innings. Bullet Rogan has exactly 15, but other than that, Clayton Kershaw's number 1 with a 157 ERA plus, meaning he has the best ERA in comparison to his peers in Major League Baseball history to this point. We have Pedro Martinez right behind him, same with Jacob deGrom. deGrom has only 1,300 innings older than Clayton Kershaw, and that's crazy, about half the innings, and Kershaw's done better over the course of double Jacob deGrom's work. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. On top of that, whip, which is walks and hits per inning pitched, that doesn't make the best pitcher ever necessarily, but you kind of see some of the best pitchers ever in the statistic. And you'll see Clayton Kershaw is 5th, and again, he has less innings than all these pitchers, or he wasn't pitching in the 1910s like Addie Joss and Ed Walsh. Not saying they aren't great pitchers, but Clayton Kershaw pitches in one of the more offensive-friendly environments in Major League Baseball history, aside from the 2000s. Shout out to Pedro Martinez right here. And because of that, he's also in historic company as one of the best ever. Look at all-time strikeout leaders. He's never really been like the guy who gets 300 strikeouts a year. I don't think he ever did, actually. Did he? Am I wrong? 1 time. So 301 1 year. But he still lags behind players like Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson here. But strikeouts don't make you a good pitcher necessarily. It just really is a important part of the game, and that gets an instant out, which actually helps his whip because that prevents hits and walks. More strikeouts, less walks makes you a good pitcher. But he has 2,500 innings is all, and he'll pass 3,000 strikeouts before passing 3,000 innings pitched. Only Max Scherzer and Pedro Martinez have been able to do that. Everybody else in the 3,000 strikeout club has over 3,000 innings pitched. So really impressive stat there as well. He'll be probably just, the 20th pitcher all time after Zach Greinke gets in, so maybe the 21st all time to actually get to that point. Also, I just wanted to show his percentile rankings. So this just shows what percent in Major League Baseball he's in. So is in the 93rd percentile of preventing barrels, and so that means he's better than 93% of baseball. His fastball velocity is 15th percentile, meaning 85% of Major League Baseball actually throws harder than Clayton Kershaw. But who cares about these two? Because his curve is the big looping curve, and he can kill you with a bunch of different pitches. And because of that, that's what really makes Clayton Kershaw a valuable pitcher. I also wanted to point out the reason why his cards might not be super high is just because of his postseason performance. He has a 4.19 ERA in the postseason. I think he'll have one of the better postseasons of his career this year. We'll find out in 2 or 3 days when he plays the Padres in Game 2. But the reason I say that is because he's actually healthy for for the first time in a while. He just came off of the IL, had 3 or 4 starts, and just dominated. So I think that could be a valuable thing for Kershaw. I just bought a Bowman Chrome X Factor autograph from 2006 of Clayton Kershaw. I paid like $1,700 to $1,800 for it, right around that range. Probably worth less than I paid at this point, just because everything's dropped since I bought that. But I think long term, that's going to hold up very, very well. I don't know how much it's going to go up. He is a pitcher again, but I do think once he retires, we'll look at all these crazy numbers, just like we're doing with Pujols, and that's what people really appreciate these players once again. And I think long term, those Bowman Chrome autographs are really short printed in comparison to modern players, less parallels, the base card has less, and on top of that, modern players like Soto, Acuna, Tatis, all their base Bowman Chrome autographs go for more than the parallels of Clayton Kershaw, which makes no sense because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer type player. Well, those other players could be, but they have to do a lot of work between now and 2040 when they're in the Hall of Fame or trying to get into the Hall of Fame. So that's Clayton Kershaw. That's who I'm buying and why I think his cards are undervalued in comparison to other great baseball players, and especially like the best pitchers of all time. I think he's in the argument, at least the best pitcher of our generation. Next up, my number 2 pick is Carlos Correa, and you might be surprised by this, but I want to point out something really fast. Carlos Correa just finished his age 27 season and has about 39.5 WAR, 40 WAR through age 27. In the next 3 years, before his age 28, his age 29, and his age 30 season, if he averages 4 WAR a year, he's going to have 52 WAR by age 30. That's really, really, really good. I don't think we quite understand how good that is, especially from a shortstop who's only had 3 seasons playing more than 130 games to be able to accrue this great of numbers. And it's really crazy to look at his OPS plus this year of 140. See, it's the best of his career, and he's coming off of he has an opt-out with the Twins. He's going to hit the free agent market, and he could go to the Yankees. He could go to the Red Sox. He could go to the Giants. He could go to the Dodgers. All these teams need to fill a shortstop position, and if he goes to a big team, that will automatically help his cards. I don't think Twins fans really want to collect Correa's cards because they know he's not going to stay, so why would they put their money into him? Astros fans don't want to collect Correa just because he left the Astros, so it puts his cards in limbo, and that's why they've dropped, even though his year this year was really pretty dang good. It wasn't like MVP caliber, but it was a very good year, especially for a shortstop. He won a platinum glove last year at shortstop, being 6'4", not moving off to third base will help his value for the long term. He'll go into the Hall of Fame if he makes it to that point as a primary shortstop. So I think Carlos Correa, his cards are dirt cheap. When I say dirt cheap, I just mean in comparison to other players of his caliber. You can even compare him to Lindor, and they're much cheaper than Lindor. You can compare him to a lot of different prospects in minor league baseball that are shortstops that wish they could get to this point by age 27 and never probably will. And Carlos Correa's cards are cheaper than theirs. So I think if he can go to a big team and have just another good year like this one next year, I totally believe his cards will go up. I can't guarantee it. Obviously, the economy can't crash, and there has to be a full season for Correa, both of which are probably not going to happen. There probably will be more of a downturn in the economy, and Correa has proven he doesn't play a lot of full seasons a lot of the time. Done it 2 years in a row, so I have some confidence, and that's why I like Correa. One thing I wanted to point out, the reason why he has such good WAR for so few games is because he averages 7.2 WAR for every 162 games played, which is 7th all-time for shortstops. You can see Tatis here, sad because he did steroids, unfortunately. And he compares to Ozzie Albies, Cal Ripken Jr., Lindor, Tulowitzki, and all these other great players through this point of his career. So that's why I think Carlos Correa has some interesting potential. My last player is Michael Nelson Trout. It's been way too long since I spoke about Mike Trout, and he's so good. He's so good. This year, played 119 games, still had 40 home runs and 80 RBI. You might be saying, why would I buy Mike Trout? His cards are expensive. I'm not telling you to buy Mike Trout. I'm buying Mike Trout. I love the guy. I think he's very good at baseball, and I think all time we aren't quite appreciating it. I know everyone talks about it. Everyone bashes him because of no playoff appearances. Totally get that. I do think in his 30s he'll have more playoff appearances than his 20s. Won't be too hard. He only had 1 in his 20s. I either hope the Angels with the new owners spend on pitching and invest in that part of the game, or he gets traded. Perry Manasseh did a good job with the Braves, I believe is who he was with before he came to the Angels. And because of that, I think that could help. Trout, I just want to point out, he's one of like 3 or 4 players all time to ever be able to hit 40 home runs in less than 120 games. And we saw with Ken Griffey Jr. and other, Mickey Mantle, even great baseball players, these dominant 20s and then injuries just kind of ruin their 30s. And even though Mike Trout has that weird back rib issue, I still think he's going to have a better 30s than both Griffey and Mantle. Mantle had a good 31, 32, 33 season, but after that, he really didn't do much. I think Trout's going to age well. We're seeing him age into power. If we looked at his rate stats for this year, probably was averaging about 50 home runs. This year he got hurt really quickly, so it was hard to say. This year he would hit over 50 home runs, and this year he'd hit over 50 home runs if he didn't get hurt again. So injuries are the big thing, but he's at 350 homers through his age 30 season. That gives him 10 more years to get to 600. And I think 600 is the magic number. I think he'll get there as long as he can just play a decent amount of games. 700 is going to be very, very difficult. If any modern player, active player can do it, I think it's Mike Trout. Yordan Alvarez, maybe. He's a little bit older from his debut, which hurts, but I think Mike Trout has that potential. But overall, I think Mike Trout's cards are lower than they've ever been. I just bought a card, and it's 30% of what it was 6 months ago at the beginning of this season. So that's the economy crashing, Mike Trout's injury news. On top of that, the Angels being out of the playoffs, tons of disappointing things that have led to this point. And I think now is a decent time where there's some good buys on Mike Trout. I'm not saying every card is a good buy of Mike Trout, because not every card is. I still think the update rookie base card in PSA 10 is probably overvalued a little bit, that type of situation. But there's some great refractor parallels that are worth a lot of money that could be a good buy right now. His Bowman Chrome autographs are cheaper than they've been in probably 3 to 5 years. All these different things present an interesting buying opportunity, and I've taken advantage of that. I've also sold some Mike Trout to cover those cards, and it hurts selling the cards that I love for so cheap. But when you buy cards, you got to sell cards, and that's kind of what it is. One thing I want to point out, he has the highest OPS plus ever for a right-handed hitter. And if you look at players who played past 1950, he is third all-time in OPS plus. OPS plus takes into consideration your OPS compared to league average, just like ERA plus does for pitchers. So really impressive. Also, shout out to little Aaron Judge, I think tied for 14th overall. Great job, Aaron. Great baseball player, but he just debuted really old as well. I also want to point out who he compares to through his age 30 season. A lot of Hall of Famers. When we look at his Hall of Fame statistics, he's there in every single part of this statistic. He's only 30 years old. So if you can have a decent 30s, Trout could have some major success. His sprint speed's still 95th percentile at age 30. His barrel percentage is 99th percentile. He has great defense, 81st percentile. Arm strength's 84th percentile. So it just shows there's still gas in the tank if he can just remain healthy. And maybe that's a fool's goal to think he will. Hey, why not? It's gambler's fallacy to think he'll be injured all the time, but it's also gambler's fallacy if I think he'll be healthy because he was injured. You get my point. Mike Trout's good, and I think if he can stay healthy, there's a lot of value in his cards. Other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with my picks, and I will see you in the next one.